Mr. President, we are in the middle of an historically important debate here in Washington. Republicans have hatched a partisan proposal behind closed doors that would shovel $1 trillion in tax giveaways to giant corporations and the wealthy, while undermining the health care and raising taxes for millions of middle-class families. If it passes, it could affect the lives of every single American for an entire generation. Now, last night, the people of Alabama elected a new senator to represent them here in Washington. So now, Republicans who control the Senate face a choice. Will they allow Senator-elect Doug Jones to take his seat among his colleagues before a final vote on their tax plan? We actually know something about that kind of choice in my home state of Massachusetts. On January 19th, 2010, Massachusetts elected a new senator to represent them here in Washington. The result was just as shocking to Democrats as last night's result was to Republicans. It also came when we were in the middle of another historically important policy debate here in Washington: health care. A lot of people thought that Democrats should ram through the final version of their bill in Congress before Brown could be seated. Now, I could stand here and read you quote after quote after quote from Republicans who now control the Senate, talking about how unfair that would be, how corrupt that would be, and how anti-democratic that would be. I could go on and on about how today's Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, said this would be gamesmanship. But I want to talk about what Democrats actually did. Democrats rejected the idea of ramming through the bill before Brown could take his seat in the Senate. Almost immediately, Jim Webb, a Democratic senator from Virginia, called for a suspension of any health care vote until after Brown arrived. The day after the Massachusetts election, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said publicly, "We're going to wait until the new senator arrives until we do anything more on health care." Massachusetts Democratic Senator John Kerry held a joint press conference with Republican Scott Brown that same week, where he said, quote, "Seating Scott Brown as expeditiously as possible is important. We want to respect the election results, and nobody wants to delay this process." And President Obama, whose entire health care agenda was on the line, said this: "Here's one thing I know, and I just want to make sure that this is off the table. The Senate certainly shouldn't try to jam anything through until Scott Brown is seated. People in Massachusetts spoke. He's got to be part of that process." Now, this wasn't an easy decision. Waiting for Brown slowed down the adoption of health care for 2 additional months. More importantly, it meant that Democrats lost their filibuster-proof majority, and as a consequence, the final bill couldn't achieve nearly as much as Democrats had hoped for. But we did it anyway. We did it because democracy matters, even when it means that it might slow down a president's agenda. Democracy matters, even when a Senate seat held for decades by a liberal lion is taken over by a conservative. Democracy matters, especially when it is inconvenient. If we're honest, we know that there hasn't been a lot of democracy around this tax bill. This is a bill that was written and rewritten in the dead of night beyond closed doors. It's filled with errors and unintended consequences. It's animated by a rotten wealth transfer from millions of hardworking Americans to a handful of corporations and billionaires. But up until now, we have at least respected the principle that each state gets to pick its senators, and those senators get to vote for or against the final product. This afternoon, we're being told that Republicans have a final tax deal. Nobody's seen it, but we could be voting on it in the next couple of days. There is no reason to ram through that kind of massive restructuring of our economic system before Alabama gets its new senator, unless Republicans are concerned that their deal won't withstand a couple of more weeks of public scrutiny. The election of Doug Jones will not change which party controls the Senate. The election of Doug Jones will not give him or Democrats the power to block the tax bill or any other piece of legislation. But it will respect the people of Alabama and their choice. It should happen before any more tax votes take place in the Senate.